But on NFL.com, a great piece by my colleague from the NFL Media Group about the first-round grade quarterbacks available and who wants them and who's concerned about them and what does it mean for the draft and free agency that's about to kick into higher gear next week. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Media Group here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Tom?
Probably better than I was last March 11th, Rich. I was looking back. We were talking on TV that day about how some NFL teams had started pulling their scouts off the road. If you remember, there were certain teams that put in restrictions for, you could only drive to pro days,
right.
And some teams flat out shut it down. And then within 24 to 48 hours, Tom Hanks had COVID and the NBA had stopped playing. Pro days were over, and here we are a year later.
That's exactly the way it went. No doubt about it. But then the new league year, the league was saying, look, we can do this all virtually. And then they decided, let's do the draft virtually and let's keep everything on point just in case everything does work out. And then the season doesn't have a single canceled game. And now here we are back for another new league year trying to figure out how it all works with a lower cap. What are you hearing about? I know that you've been tweeting about so much about this subject matter, about teams and how they are able, where they knew it would be less money coming in, but are the cuts that we're seeing right now based on the actual hard number being delivered about 48 hours ago, Tom?
There were certainly teams that were delaying some of their business until they had the final number, just because they were, whether you're doing contract extensions or restructures or you're making decisions on cuts, you just wanted to have the best feel possible, the most information about not just the cap for 2021, but what direction it may go in 2022 and beyond. And, I've talked to a lot of people, between guys who work the salary cap for NFL teams, general managers, agents. Everybody has different information on where the cap is going to go in 2022, 2023. But that all affects free agency. And that's going to be, part of this extraordinarily unique dynamic that we have to deal with is you do have this rash of cuts that is taking place across the league. That rash of cuts is going to continue to next Wednesday and beyond because, if you want to use a post-June 1 designation, save yourself cap space now, you have to do that after the league year begins. So you're going to get cuts there. You're also going to have teams that agree to terms with free agents and then release guys to make room for them. So this is just the beginning of guys hitting the street. And then on top of that, you have the fact that I had a long chat with an agent this morning about this. Since we don't have the certainty on the salary cap in future years, but everybody has a pretty good idea with the new TV money when those media deals are done, and that should happen sooner than later, the cap should spike in 2023. Well, if all the teams are crying poor now and saying we need to do sub-market deals, why am I going to sign a 5-year contract and now getting paid at the 2021 level when the cap's potentially $40-50 million higher 2 years down the line? There's so many moving parts. The marketplace is more unsettled than it has ever been, certainly that I recall in my close to 20 years covering the NFL. The teams had not put as much information out. There's very few, as much as we like to say that the negotiations allowed to begin on Monday. Usually by this time, there have been a lot of clandestine or not so clandestine meetings at the scouting combine. People have a good idea what their market is, and I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to on both sides of this over the past couple of weeks who say, we just don't know where this thing's going to land. There's not that much information.
And maybe we don't know it because we're not seeing somebody, sitting at Steak and Shake together at 1 a.m, or I'm serious, or sharing a glass of wine, in the corner of a steakhouse in Indianapolis. They could be doing it by Zoom. We have no idea. I mean, this sort of stuff could be going down very simply that we just have no idea about. So we don't know the tracks to cover.
And it's always it's a comical type of a scene too, Rich, normally, because you have agents, especially the ones who represent a lot of players, who will be just handing out business cards with the list of their free agents. Some of them have their list of the draft guys on the back end, and you got every 20 minutes people are running around. You're seeing people passing,
right,
especially later at night. Nobody has time to stop and chat. All that now has been transitioned into a virtual environment. There are teams that have had Zooms with agents and tried to talk through things that way. But, as we all know from living this for the past year, having those conversations in person is a lot different than trying to do it with 30 minutes virtually here and there.
So then let's try and, instead of maybe some fans are have their eyes spinning in the back of their heads because we're talking numbers and cap and business in such a way that might not be translatable. Which teams do you think, or are hearing with your ear to the ground as it is, are best positioned for this topsy-turvy, unconventional new league year, free agency period, and draft? Which teams are best positioned, do you think?
Well, certainly, the Colts, just because Chris Ballard's been so frugal with all the cap space that they've had every year, they're going to be in a strong position. The Jets, between their draft capital and cap space, are another team that's well positioned. They've got a lot of maneuverability. They've got to figure out exactly what their quarterback situation is. The Patriots are pretty well positioned at this point because they, between opt-outs and some releases, they kind of reset from a salary cap perspective. I would expect that they're going to be active. And then you have teams like the Browns that always take care of their cap. They're always well positioned with a lot of spending power. One of the fascinating dynamics always is when you have the teams that are restructuring everybody or cutting players, like the Saints, who've been doing this for a decade. They have been since 2011, when they had some challenges and a cap penalty, and they started doing this. Like, they've been a perpetual kicking your problems into the future type of situation. There's no magic. That's one of the misconceptions. There is no such thing as cap magic. Every dollar you spend hits the cap eventually. All the teams are doing when they're doing these restructured and they clear all this cap space is now that hits them later. It hits them next year or 2 years down the line or whenever it may be. And so, can you survive like that? The Saints have shown that you can for a long time, but, in a perfect world, they're not cutting Janoris Jenkins and they're not cutting Emmanuel Sanders. They're keeping some of these guys. That's the price you have to pay, and this is the rare year where even those teams that don't push their problems into the future are having to make some of those hard decisions because the cap lands at $182.5 million, which is not only down about $17 million for $16 million from what it was a year ago, but is down $25 or $30 million from what 1 year ago every cap manager in the league would have said that's what the cap will be in 2021.
Tom Pelissero breaking it down, my colleague from the NFL Media Group. And so the second overall pick, and you mentioned the Jets, how they've got a ton of cap space. They hold so many cards. The dominoes tumble in a way that affects so many other teams because we're assuming the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence, because Urban Meyer's not taking this swing at the NFL without the guarantee of somebody generationally talented like him being able to be right in front of him and for his choosing. So we're just going to put that aside. You wrote a piece about all five of the first round graded quarterbacks for NFL.com, including Lawrence. So the Jets have that second overall pick. The Texans hold a card too. If they do decide to put Deshaun Watson on the table, that might affect the Jets' thinking because of their draft capital that they have as well. What did you glean from all of the scouts and evaluators about these quarterbacks that can give us a little bit of a roadmap how the next 6-7 weeks are going to play out, Tom?
Well, let's start with Trevor Lawrence. In my time doing this story, and usually I write it going into the combine, there was no true combine this year, so I did it in advance of Trey Lance's pro day as we really get into pre-draft season starting tomorrow. In all my years, I can't think of another quarterback who was as free of questions going into the draft process as Trevor Lawrence. Even last year, when Joe Burrow was the prohibitive favorite, you had a lot of scouts who would put 4th, 5th round grades on Joe Burrow the prior year, who were talking about how, his arm strength is not at the top of this class, athletic ability is not at the top of this class, 1-year producer, all those types of questions. With Trevor Lawrence, everyone goes, yeah, you'd like him maybe to have a few more pounds on him. You wonder a little bit why he didn't play better against LSU, why he didn't play better against Ohio State, but he also, beat up Alabama pretty good as a true freshman in a 15-0 season. He's a guy that nobody really questions, and nobody says that they would have an issue taking him number one overall. The only real debate there is just, is he the best suited player to run the offense that Urban Meyer has preferred in the past, which is going to be, have some zone read elements. Not that Trevor Lawrence can't do that, because he is, a tall kid. He's a good athlete. He's obviously intelligent. It's really more a matter of, do you want to expose him to getting hit a little bit more than he necessarily was at Clemson? But the consensus is he goes number one. The consensus, based on everyone I've spoken to so far, is that Zach Wilson is the second quarterback and quite likely the number 2 overall pick, whether that goes to the Jets or someone else. With Zach Wilson, he is a one-year type of a producer. Obviously, he had a fantastic season last year at BYU. Smaller, he's undersized. He's had an injury history, torn labrum, broken thumb. That stuff kind of put him behind in 2019, cost him some time, and obviously had him fighting for his job come last August and September, but took advantage of it. The big questions there are going to be the durability and also just what kind of a leader is Zach Wilson, because teams certainly have heard, and some of this has been written, that he's confident, borderline cocky. I had one high-ranking executive refer to it as Baker Mayfield syndrome, where he's got that edge, and he's a guy who you like it up to a point. But then when things go sideways, if you're not playing well, can you toe that same kind of a line? So there's definitely an evaluation going on there, but the tape is impressive. I mean, he comes across as a gunslinger. Teams like that, the way that he can fit some throws in. And so certainly he seems to be on solid ground. Where things really get interesting is going to be the third, fourth, fifth quarterbacks taken, because Mac Jones has picked up steam from Alabama. He helped himself on and off the field, really, at the Senior Bowl. The only one of those top five quarterbacks who got to go to an all-star game this year, which also means because of the COVID restrictions, he's the only guy who has had face-to-face in-person time with any NFL team so far in the pre-draft process. Some of the others might get it at pro days, but even that is up to the school. NFL teams are not allowed to set up dinner, visits, nothing. They're not even allowed to set up time to speak with the player at the pro day unless the school specifically puts it on the schedule. So Mac Jones got a little bit ahead. He's somebody who teams wanted to dig into from a personality perspective, because some of the word out of the school early on, particularly when he was backing up to Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts, was just that he was a hothead. He's a former tennis player who was pretty good as a kid. He would have, he was kind of the John McEnroe, it sounds like, of the youth tennis circuit, where he'd have some fits, and there was a question about mental toughness, but he answered a lot of that. He's really highly regarded in terms of his football IQ. His preparation is really good. He's just not the best athlete in the class. He doesn't have the best arm in the class. So the question with him is just, how much better can he get? The floor is high, but where's the ceiling? Can he be a top starter, or does he top out as a borderline starter, top backup type of a guy?
You haven't said hold on, just to give you a little bit of a break so you could swallow or get a glass of water. This is amazing, Tom Pelissero.
I know it's your show.
No.
You gave me a broad-based question.
No, it is not. It is not. It's also my way to reset for the radio audience in case they're just tuning into this fantastic breakdown. You haven't mentioned Justin Fields' name yet. So that leaves Trey Lance and Justin Fields of people you haven't mentioned yet. So what's your evaluation of them? Again,
Trevor Lawrence 1, Zach Wilson 2 seems to be the way that most people have it stacked right now.
Right.
Then 3, 4, 5 is where it's interesting. We just talked about Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Lance is kind of he's a question mark, quite frankly, because he started 17 games at North Dakota State. Only one of those games came in the past 14 months because their season got moved to the spring, and he's only thrown 30 passes in any of those games twice. So he operates a pro-style offense, which everybody likes, but on the flip side, you also are running a ton of play action. You got wide receivers running wide open. You're playing in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and he had no all-star game. So everything seems to be good from an intelligence standpoint. People have liked talking to him when they've gotten him virtually. He seems to throw it well enough. They want to see, there's some accuracy questions just because, again, he had guys running wide open all over the place. I spoke to his quarterbacks coach, Quincy Avery, yesterday, who told me he's going to be a little bit more compact in his delivery. They've been working on that since October because, of course, he didn't play football after October, so he's had nothing but time to work on that. So they're hoping just to tighten up his stroke a little bit. But it's also just, can you bet on him? That's what one, executive that I really trust with a strong college scouting background told me was just, you got 17 games, and there's nothing on the tape that's going to give you the answers. Your question is going to be, do you believe in the kid? Do you believe he can do the things you haven't seen? Because there's not going to be any more tape. You can feel like he's going to make a big jump. You just don't have that additional tape, so you got to take a guess. Now, I would say, and you brought up Justin Fields from Ohio State, and I'm not putting him fifth. I'm not ranking him in any way at this point. And this is not my opinion. I don't watch tape. I just talk to the people who do this for a living. I can tell you there are some scouts I've talked to who like what they see on tape from Trey Lance better than Justin Fields. There are people who think Trey Lance, even as a runner, is better than Justin Fields. Now, we've also seen Fields be tough, be productive, do it on the biggest stage. The questions with him arise from two areas. One is, what type of leader is he going to be? Because he is a quieter type of personality. Everybody who's been around him, people who like him, say, yeah, he's a little bit more quiet, a little more to himself. His first year, there was some criticism just about, did he really try to get to know his teammates, because he was coming in trying to win the job. Sounds like he came out of his shell more last year. He was embraced there. Now teammates vouch for him. But that just, anytime you've got a quieter player, whether that's Kyler Murray was kind of like that, Justin Herbert last year was kind of like that. They're not the typical alpha male, and so that is something you dig into. And then the other piece of it is just how ready is he for the NFL game, because the Ohio State offense is kind of notorious for limiting what the quarterback has to read, and that goes back a number of years. Now, a scout texted me last night after reading the story and said, well, Ryan Day does have a lot of pro-style routes that you see him throw, but it's the difference between reading the whole field and going through the progressions versus the way that the Ohio State coaches kind of teach them to read plays out. And I spoke to his quarterback coach, John Beck, who said, yeah, I understand where scouts watch that tape, and they have questions, because I did too. And he said they talk through plays about just, why is the ball going here? Why on this, you don't have the deep shot, and then you don't throw the 5-yard under route. You take off running. And the answer to Beck was, this is not him being inefficient. Mm-hmm. This is what he's being coached to do. In other words, again, you're in an issue where it's not a matter of aptitude. Everybody says that he is smart. It's a matter of, you haven't seen him do it. And so is that going to translate better than maybe some other quarterbacks who have tried to make that transition in the past?
Lot of stuff. And the great thing about it, Tom Pelissero, and just to give you more kudos for your piece, you really didn't even scratch the surface of all the details that's in there on NFL.com. I appreciate the call. Look for my call over the next couple of weeks. Let's keep revisiting this issue, because, as you know, the deck keeps getting shuffled, certainly based on what we're going to see next week with the new league year. Thanks for the call, Tom.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
You bet. That's Tom Pelissero. Follow him on Twitter. I do. Great information. Just great stuff right there. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.